I need to push this thing in the, give me a second. All right. Hello, everyone. I am Kumar, and I'm currently at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So before I start, there is a disclaimer that I am here in my personal capacity and I do not represent my present and previous employer. Um, so today, basically, I'm going to share my experience as an interviewee and as an interviewer both. I have been in both places, just like all of you. Um, I made some career changes, so I'm going to share my stories as well. Um, okay, so this is today's agenda. First, I will talk a little bit about me. Then I will share if you know nothing about software engineering, how to start. So basically, essentially start from zero. Um, and say, for example, you started, you did some preparation, and now you received a call. Then how should you behave before the interview, during the interview? And I will go a little bit like in deep what a typical interview comprises of. Say it has coding round, system design round, behavioral round, and how you should do after interview. So basically, it will cover the whole life cycle from the beginning to the end. And like, if you have questions, please post it in the Zoom chat, and we will take those questions at the end of this discussion. All right, little bit about me. I completed my undergrad in electronics and communication in India. After that, I joined Cognizant. It's an IT consulting company, and I worked for 3 years. Then I came to the US for my master's, and I completed my master's in VLSI major from Texas A&M University. After that, I joined Intel as an SOC Design Engineer. So at Intel, my team used to create high-performance computers. While working at Intel, I realized that my interest lies more in software because I was involved in making some scripts and some internal tools. Also, I realized that in software, if I want to learn some new skill, I can just go on Google and there are tons of materials out there. That was a very strong motivation because for learning, it was all the resources were easily accessible. Um, I'm currently at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure from last 2 years, and since then I have interviewed 50 plus candidates. So I'm going to share things that I observed during an interview, and if you will, notice those small things, it will enhance your ability as a candidate a lot. All right. So when I started, I did not know what a typical software interview looks like. Honestly, it was intimidating and I was not even sure I can do it. So I was not confident. I always felt that in order to be a software engineer, you have to be this geeky kid and you need to do programming from grade 6. Obviously, it was not true. I come to know that basically there is a systemic approach, and if you follow this, anybody can become a software engineer. So the first step in the software interview process is to start from your resume. So I have added like a link. Can you guys see this link? Aditi, can you confirm?
Yes, I can see that link.
Okay. So basically, I just added a sample. A typical resume should look like one page, and it is just an example. You can go over it later, but basically, I wanted to showcase that how a one page resume looks like. After say you have worked on your resume, and it's possible that you do not have much to write on your resume. Say you are not from software industry, or you are working as a mechanical engineer, or you are still in some community college or in some boot camp and you do not have much projects to write on the resume. In that case, what you can do is you can build something, and you can build an app, you can build a website, you can basically build anything that you wish. And there are tons of free resources online. So edx, coursera, udacity, all these things are free mock platform. You can actually go there and do some projects and put it on your resume. You can create your GitHub profile and basically create a software portfolio. There is another very good YouTube channel that I have added here that you can basically refer. Basically, what they do is they post tons of material. For example, yesterday they posted a 31-hour course on C++, or there is this iOS development course. So you can just follow along these courses, and at end of this course, you will end up creating something. It's like no pressure, and then you will, and these instructors are excellent, and there are so many other YouTube channels as well. I'm just sharing one example so that you will like know what a typical free YouTube channel looks like, and then you can explore more. So saying you have built something, now you can write some project on your resume. Now you need to start preparation for an interview. So a typical software interview, and there is one small disclaimer. These interview patterns are mostly seen in companies like Google, Facebook, Netflix. Not necessarily all companies follow this pattern, but majority of like these big companies follow this pattern. So whenever you are interviewing for some other companies or even for these companies, please check with the recruiter what are the patterns that they follow. So in a typical interview, you will have a coding round and system design round and a behavioral round. So for coding round, if you want to prepare, you can start from data structures and algorithms. So typically, you will learn basic data structures like array, linked list, hash, etc. And then you can learn about sorting algorithm, and there are like graph algorithm, binary search algorithm. So there are several other algorithms. So one good starting point can be again YouTube channel, and it's all free. One of my most favorite channel is called My Code School. This is a really thorough and good channel for a beginner. You can start from like this first playlist, and then you can start from data structures, binary search, sorting algorithm, and like you can just follow it along. Take notes while you are like learning this, and after end of this course, you will be pretty good in data structures and algorithms. But again, this is just an example. There are tons of other materials as well. You can follow any such material that you find good for yourself. The other resource is leadcode.com. So once you learn data structures, then you need to prepare data structures. So in that, for that, there is like tons of platform. HackerRank is one, LeetCode is one. There is some other platform. So a typical LeetCode platform looks like this. You have a problem, and you will be given like a basic template to solve that problem. So you will write your code. So say I wrote some code here, and once I wrote the code, at the bottom, you will have this run button. So you can like click run, and you can basically test, and you can run some tests. And finally, you will submit it. Once you submit it, it will give you this whole like chart saying that you are 87% faster than all other submissions which is done. So you can even like go in detail and like see how your solution was, and you can actually click on this solution, and you can actually see where do you how did your algorithm do in terms of like time complexity. So whenever you are solving these problems, always try to see that you fall in like top, like say 30% in the time complexity, and even look at your space complexity as well. The other thing to while practicing, the other thing that you should do is once you solve a problem, there is a discuss section in the problem. I am not sure why my internet is so slow. So anyway, so basically there is this discuss section. A lot of solutions are given here. You can read those solutions and learn a lot from it. Like you can go on like most votes, and you can read like these solutions, and these some of these solutions has a lot to learn. Okay, so once your coding is done, then the other thing is to do is system design. So in a typical system design, you will be asked to design, say, something like Uber or Twitter. And the basic expectation is to know ins and out about like a system. Now, For example, there is this free GitHub open source kind of uh, repository where they have explained everything about system design. So you can like read about it, and it has like all the diagrams and how to like approach a problem, and there are tons of material out there. So you can like read through it, and I'm sure this will be a good starting point for you. So for example, what is a cap theorem, and what is CP versus AP? So basically, all these things you need to know in order to perform well in the system design. I will have more details later on this, but this is just I'm showing the resource. And then there is like behavioral round. In the behavioral round, I have added one more resource for system design, and there are tons of resources online, so you can use any. For behavioral round, I think every companies have some leadership values. Amazon has some 13, 14 leadership values. So the expectation is that you answer questions about these values. For example, tell me a time when you did something that was not assigned to you. So basically, they're trying to see how whether you take ownership in work or not. So you need to answer this question. And in order to answer this question, you have to follow something called STAR format. So in a STAR format, you will have a situation, and then you will talk about the task, then you'll talk about action, and finally result. So I have added this link in the PPT as well. You can go over it like later, but basically you need to practice these stories beforehand. So finally, now you created your resume, you have some projects on it, you prepared for coding round, you prepared for system design round, and you prepared for behavioral round. Now you need to get a call. So to get an interview call, you need to have professional networking. So if you have a friend who works at Facebook or Google or any such company where you want to work, you can just ask them to refer you. If you do not have a friend, then you can ask random people on LinkedIn, like send requests, send a message saying, hey, I have been building this, following, like this is my resume, this is my software portfolio. I was wondering if you would be, if you will be kind enough to refer me in your company. Okay. So this is, so now you have received the call. So you made the professional network and you received the call. So what next? So before the interview, okay. Before the interview, always ask, am I a good fit to the role? What is the difference between backend, full stack, and front end? Because sometimes what happens is you get a call for a front end engineer, but you have prepared for backend engineer, and then you go there and you don't do well. If you know for sure that the position is about front end, I think you need to talk to a recruiter and ask them to find a role that suits with your skill set. Other thing is to ask that why this company, why do you want to join this company? That will give you much clarity, and you will perform really well in the interview because you know about the company. You can check with your friends. There are so many forums like Blind, and you can go there and like read about the company, and it will give you some insight about their interview process as well. What are my strengths? That is very, very important because again, you will be more confident if you know about your strength. A lot of time you will have some 5 minutes at the end of interview to ask some questions to interviewer. So prepare questions beforehand. And this is one of the most important thing about any interview. Always do at least 10 mock interviews. So if you have, especially if you have not interviewed for a long time, there is like a website called Pramp, and there is InterviewBit. There are so many other websites where you can do peer-to-peer mock interview. It means you will interview someone and someone else will interview you, and you will give feedback to each other. So always do mock interviews. So now you received the call, and you have prepared before interview whatever you need to do. So during interview, always be confident, bring your own self. It means that say these days majority of interviews are virtual, so always turn on your video, present the best of yourself. It gives the interviewer an ability to see how you are doing and give you hint whenever it is required. You should also think that is there a way I can draw something and show to the interviewer, maybe a digital notepad or iPad, and connect it with the computer, or have a whiteboard to just draw the diagram. A lot of companies these days have software tool, and you can use mouse to draw something. So maybe practice a little bit there. Do not undersell your skill. I remember once I was interviewing for a company, and the interviewer was dropping me off till parking lot, and he mentioned that, hey, I read your paper on compression, and I think it was really cool. And I don't know why I said, oh yeah, that was long time ago, and I'm not very proud of it. So obviously I did not get the call, the call, but basically do not undersell your skill. And lastly, enjoy the process. So interview is something that has a lot of randomness and noise. So enjoy the process. Do not look for results. Results may come, not come. It's not in your hand. It depends a lot of things about the role, about the interviewer. So basically enjoy the process, learn, and then if you get the job, well, otherwise move on and go for the another interview. All right. So now I will go in a little bit more detail that you already have done everything, you have prepared, and now you are in actual interview. So now suppose you are in an interview and an interviewer asks you, given an array of n element, find if element k is present in the array. Now what happens is that a lot of candidates, when they look at this problem, they immediately jump on the solution. They'll say, oh, okay, there is an array and I need to find whether element k is not there. Okay, I'll just traverse, I will have a loop and I will traverse and I will compare each element with k, and then I will return. But what happens is when they start implementing, then they realize, oh, but I don't know if I have to return the index or I have to return a boolean like true or false. So always ask the right clarifying question beforehand. That way you will have more clarity and then you can implement the code very quickly. This other good question can be, will there be any duplicates? So for example, in the array, we have 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and if we have to find whether it has number 2, so you ask that what to do, because we can either return index 1 or index 2 or index 3. So then maybe interviewer will say, return me the first index or return me any index which is valid. So depending on that, your implementation will change. Other thing is, do not make any assumption. For example, is array sorted? Because if array is sorted, you can do a binary search. If array is not sorted, say interviewer says array is not sorted, then you ask, okay, maybe this lookup is a frequent operation. And if they say yes, then you ask, can I use extra space? And if they say yes, then you ask, can I use hash? Can I just, put all the elements of array in the hash, and then lookup will be O of 1. Always run through some examples. So for example, if you have an array that has 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and you have to search k equals to 5, obviously you cannot find k equals to 5. So what you should return? So ask the interviewer, should I return -1? Or maybe interviewer say, throw some exception. So basically clarify through examples at the end that will make sure you and interviewer both are on the same page. Then there is one more point is about brute force versus optimal algorithm. Now, sometimes it's possible that you are unable to come up with a brute force optimal algorithm. And in that case, you come up with whatever algorithm comes and have a discussion with the interviewer and come to an agreement that, all right, this is the algorithm that is coming to my mind. And if interviewer will challenge you for an optimal, then have a discussion. And once interviewer agrees, then you can move. Sometimes interviewer will say, okay, you can implement the brute force now and we can see to implement optimal later. Then you can go and implement it. So basically, start implementation only if you and interviewer both are on the same page. Now, other thing is, before implementation, always talk about time and space complexity. I have seen a lot of candidates talking about time complexity, but they forget about space complexity. So please mention that. while implementing, always do a null check. What if array is empty? No matter what, always do the null check. Edge cases, what if k is float and element in the array is double? Now, this is one of the things that you can look later, that comparing a float and double is a non-trivial task. It's difficult. So when you are asking these questions, you're telling interviewer about your depth. And what if the user inputs a string for k? So k should be a number, but say what if user like is looking for a string inside an element of a number? So in that case, you will have to do some data validation and throw some exception. So basically, all these questions will tell about your depth to the interviewer, and while implementation, you have to take care of these. Sometimes it will happen that you will have to implement some utility function that is not the core part of the problem. So for example, if something is valid, or you have to compare like 4 numbers and get the max, right? So do not like spend time in implementing those. Just abstract it. Just say, interviewer, I'm assuming I have a function, and if I have time, I can implement it later and move on. Because interviewer is not interested in those utility functions. They're more interested in the code logic of the function. And if at the end you have time, you can obviously go ahead and implement those. And finally, always do a dry run, because dry run will expose if there is any bug in the code. So for example, you can take some number and you can run through the example line by line in your implementation, and then you can, if you are convinced, then you can say interviewer that, look, I am convinced. What do you think of it? So if this is basically like a step-by-step process how you should approach like a coding round. I have like put it in this chart where, like, say you spend first 2 minutes in the introduction. Sometimes they will have like a behavioral round, and obviously it varies from company to company. Some company will have 45-minute interview, some company will have 1 hour interview. Some company will ask you behavioral and coding both in the same round. So basically clarify these questions beforehand, but I'm assuming that, say you are interviewing for some company like Amazon or Oracle, so you will spend first 2 minutes on introduction, then some 30 minutes on behavioral, and then 8 minutes on clarification, then spend 5 minutes on algorithm and time and space complexity, a minute, and then 15 minutes is for your coding, 2 minutes dry run, and you have last 5 minutes to talk about conclusions. Okay. Now system design round. So in system design round, you will be asked to design a system. For example, you'll be asked to design Twitter. Now, while you are preparing for system design, you will go through all these typical design problem, design Uber, design Twitter, design Facebook. So one of the most important thing about system design is that you clarify the requirement. A lot of time, candidates directly like jump on the solution. So in Twitter, you can have a lot of features. For example, Twitter will have timeline, it has follow feature, it has hashtag feature, it has a search feature. So clarify with the interviewer which feature they want you to focus on. And it's possible that you do not know about Twitter, you have never used Twitter. In that case, also ask the interviewer, hey, I do not know about Twitter, can you please tell me some of its core features? And then interviewer will tell you Twitter is a social media platform where blah, blah, blah. And then from there, you can derive the requirement. The other thing is clarify scope of the problem. So exactly what is the scope of the problem? What do I have to design in this 30 minutes? Because system design in itself will take months to design something like Twitter, right? So if you know exactly, say maybe interviewer wants you to only focus on timeline generation, then you can basically focus on timeline. There is something called object-oriented design. For example, sometimes some companies ask like to design, say, a parking lot, in which it's like not an app or website, it's like a application. And basically in that you have to create like class diagram and like explain the relationship between class and its object. So those, you have to understand the difference between system design and object-oriented design and clarify with the interviewer from your follow-up question whether it is object-oriented or a scalable system design question. Always talk about trade-offs. A lot of candidates do this mistake whenever they are talking about something, they only talk about pros of something. So for example, if you are making choosing database for a banking system, maybe you will choose RDBMS because of its like property, the atom property. Now also, but there is one big con about RDBMS is that it horizontal scaling is difficult. So talk about it. Just say that okay, these are the pros, these are the cons, so that interviewer will know like your depth about designing a system. Be attentive to feedback from interviewer. So what happens in the course of the process, interviewer will give you some feedback. Take a step back and think why the interviewer is giving me like or asking this question. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take you to a different direction. So be attentive and then change your direction towards where interviewer wants you to take. Finally, in the behavioral round, I have seen a lot of candidates, they do not prepare for behavioral round because they are very exhausted and they get a call and they're overwhelmed and they don't have time. But I think it is very, very crucial for you to practice your stories beforehand. A lot of time you will be asked about some example, like tell me a time when you had conflict with a coworker and how did you resolve it. Now it's very difficult to come up with this story on the spot. So it's always better to write down those stories before the interview and practice it and do some mock, because stories are something that people remember, and it also impacts your like label in the interview. So whether you are a junior engineer or a senior engineer, your stories will basically decide that. So this is very, very important, and please prepare it before the interview. Other aspect is please speak with like clarity. I've seen a lot of candidate who talks a lot, but like even after like spending 5 minutes on something, interviewer do not get anything out of it. So try to see if you can minimize the word and you can like explain more using those words. I can give you an example. So say there is a candidate and who is explaining that the candidate created a log parsing tool. And if you have to explain this, say, all right, I created a tool for log parsing and it has 5 basic blocks. It has a log ingestion block where we will feed the log to the tool. Then log, it will have a filter block that will filter out any like bad unparsable content. Then we have parsing block, processing block, and finally report creation block. So what happens is if you talk in terms of logical block, interviewer can follow easily. And this is the most funny thing, that a lot of candidates, they use internal technical jargon. For example, they'll have some internal process and abbreviations. They will like use those in an interview, and interviewer has no idea about it. So try to use simple terms and generic terms. If interviewer knows about that subject, they will go in deep and then you can answer. But always like avoid using internal company specific abbreviation. We already talked about the STAR format, that is situation, task, action, and result. So whenever you are answering any behavioral question, try to follow this format. This gives a very good template for interviewer to follow, and if they are taking notes, it's easier for them to write it down. I versus we. Whenever you're talking in behavioral interview, talk about I, what you did, not like what your team achieved. It's very important because it's your interview. And I know that a lot of people think that they want to showcase their team spirit, but you can talk about like team, but always make sure you talk about your contribution in the team. Talk about the impacts and learning in any story. Sometimes you work on something that did not go as it is planned. It's okay, but talk about the learnings. Talk about the whole journey that will give an interviewer a full picture about your ability and your experience. Now, post-interview, don't feel anxious if recruiter takes time to respond. Sometimes they are on vacation, sometimes debrief takes time. Some companies have like 5-day SLA to have debrief after interview. So check with the recruiter. You can follow up, but don't feel anxious. Write down your experiences. Do not repeat the same mistake. So if you had one interview and you think you could have done better, write it down, and in the next interview, do better. Of course, host a party if you get a job. Always, always, always negotiate. It's like if you have to take one line from this whole conversation, then this is that one line. Always negotiate, because everything you are doing, of course, you want to work and there is an excitement, but salary is a very strong motivation. So whatever company is paying, even if you have no competing offer, even if it is only few $1,000s, always negotiate. And so for that, I have actually added one website that you can take a look. It's called labels.fyi. Maybe some of you already know. So this website basically covers salary from like area-wise, company-wise, etc. People post it. You can take a look at it later, and then you will know what's the salary. And finally, how to handle the rejection. So you will not be the first person. Say if you do not get into some company. There are many, right? And there are some big shots who have like posted their rejection stories. Go over it and you will know, it's just a company. All right, it did not go well this time. It will go well next time. So this is it. And now is the time for questions.
Thank you so much, Harsh, for this insightful presentation. I am sure there's a lot of takeaways. But before we go to that, let's open up the floor for any questions. Anyone? And I'm
you can stop the recording. Please stop the recording.
Right. Yes, so that people can come off the mute and just ask questions if you have any questions.